Hey Dee, how's your weather been this week?
Oh, beautiful.
Same here. It almost felt like fall yesterday, which was Thursday, but we have a lot of sleeps before the frost, so I don't want to wish summer away too soon, but man,
I agree. I sure enjoyed those 65-degree temperatures this morning. That's a blessing. But I'll start us on this episode. So it comes out in only five sleeps. And the funny thing is, our listeners don't even know when we record or not.
exactly. Well, they know if we not record, but they don't know what day we record. So for the
Yes.
record, we are recording on Friday morning, July the 19th. Hit it, Dee.
Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden an acre and a half out of 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we'd like for you to love it too.
Yes, we do want you to love it. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's get going on this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Good morning, Carol. What are you doing in the garden this week?
Well, this week in the garden, I have been picking some squash, some green beans, some peppers, more cherry tomatoes. Some of the big tomatoes are coming on. I also would like to take a moment of silence for the squash plant that got decimated by squash vine borers and squash bugs and got put
Yeah,
out to the trash. And also a
yeah.
moment of silence for the tomato hornworm that also might have ended up in a happy, dark place called the trash bag. Anyway, I should have left it out for the birds to eat. So I did clean up that stuff and I weeded and cut back some stuff. I mowed, I fertilized everything this morning. Checked on my seedlings. I've got germinations, both types of foxglove, one of the four types of delphinium, the clary sage, some of the hollyhocks, and I wish I had not planted them in the Burpee reusable seed trays with the 16 cells,
Ah,
simply because I should have planted them in in like pots, little pots, and then as
right,
they
right.
germinated, I could have pricked them out and put them in those seed trays because now I've got stuff germinating and I want to uncover them, but then other stuff hasn't germinated. Anyway, how about you?
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Yep.
This is how we learn, right? Not as much as you. I mean, I did do some harvesting of some veggies and enjoyed that and kind of posted. My Armenian cucumbers are finally starting to produce, which makes me happy. My other cucumbers are producing. The tomatoes are having a big blank space because we had all those 100-degree temps.
Yep.
But since I planted mostly indeterminates and I planted a few later plants, I may have another tomato. I wouldn't call it a resurgence. I'd just call it a trickle. And then I did some green beans. I've been pretty busy. And I've also harvested some flowers, did a little weeding, but honestly, just kind of basic.
Yeah. So you start off by
Yeah.
saying you didn't do as much as I did, but I think you did as much as I did.
I didn't plant seeds and
Well, the
try to do
seeds,
biennials.
well, the seeds I planted last week. I get credit for planting them a week, 7, 8 days ago.
Right. That's true.
So,
Well, and I did move some plants around, which you're not supposed to do this time of year, but I think something people need to understand about me is that I don't feel beholden to any plants in my garden, which when we do our favorites, people will really see that. It doesn't hurt my feelings if they die. I just like, you know what? You didn't want to live here. Tough
oh,
noogies.
it hurts my feelings if I paid a lot of money for it and did a good job planting it. And then I'm like, what?
It doesn't hurt my feelings because I don't pay a lot of money for anything anymore, except for maybe a rose now and
I
then
was
or
going
a
to say those
daylily.
roses aren't cheap.
They aren't cheap, but they're doing okay. I just don't, I guess I'm not attached. Let's put it that way. I'm not
That's a good
attached.
way to put it. Good way to put it. Let's play favorites.
Tell me about yours.
So mine is the salvias that I planted in the big pots on the back patio. They are doing exactly what I thought they would do. They are attracting hummingbirds, and I can sit there at lunchtime and look out the window, and within a minute or two, a hummingbird will come up. And so I'm surprised, but my favorite one is called Saucy Red. It's from Doom and Orange.
Uh-huh.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. I'm not
I've grown that one. It's a
good
good
one.
one.
Skyscraper pink and skyscraper dark purple would probably be a little better, but they are tiny bit shaded, but still putting out some blooms.
Hmm.
Then I have the black and blue front, which is a proven winner, and it's also doing great. So do not make me pick a favorite amongst those three. The saucy red is my favorite, but those others are, I'm going to do that again, Dee. I'm just going to fill those pots with the salvias and the petunias underneath. Honestly, they haven't done much. And they're all those, and I don't want to put down fancy varieties, but they're kind of fancy varieties. And I think if I put petunias in there with them, it will be seed grown ones, just old fashioned seed grown ones.
Yeah, I'm kind of over I went through a stage where I wanted those really showy party girl type petunias, but I have found that in my climate, the ones that trail are the best. So that means the old fashioned climbing, the wave petunias, but I want the ones that really spread. And there's
Yes.
different wave petunias. So people kind of need to research those. And then the proven winners ones that spread, which are always Vista. Vista Super Tunia, if it has Vista in the name, it's a spreader. So those are my personal favorites. Yeah, I'm just over the other ones. I forgot that. I did collect seed from my climbing petunia so I could
Good
just sow
deal.
the seeds. I will say this, that one petunia, now that we brought petunias, we'll see if I can remember the silver vein, success silver vein.
Yes.
That is not a super spreader, but I have it planted in a bed that gets really, really hot sun on the west. It's on the northwest side. That thing has been a trooper. So I got to give it some kudos.
You do got to give it some kudos. Now, we got off on a tangent of petunias. So unlike us not to stick to our topics, Dee. So unlike us. Tell us about your favorite, which wasn't your petunias.
My favorite this week is the African marigolds. I can't say enough about the African marigolds. I That's what I want to grow now. And I grew Hawaii, which is great. It's kind of an orangey, orangey, yellowish orange.
Yeah.
And then I grew Moonlight, which is a pale yellow. And then I grew Keys Orange, they've all three just been upright growers, fabulous, have a lot of scent to the foliage. Nothing's eaten them. Hallelujah. I'll tell you what I don't like, that stupid court jester petunia. It has been a failure in my garden.
Talk
Remember,
about that all winter and how excited you were to grow court
I was
jester.
so excited to grow it. And Queen Sophie, I think Queen Sophie's been great. She's small, but she's done great. Court Jester is a flopping mess. I finally have pulled every one of them out because I'm like, you're flopping over everybody and you're just making a mess and you don't even bloom much. So down on Court Jester, up
Well,
on
since you
African marigolds.
since you brought up marigolds, I did post a picture of my signet
I
marigolds
saw
on
them.
Instagram, and it's the little gem series, I guess,
Uh
tangerine
huh.
gem, lemon gem. Looks really, really pretty, and I just do love that. And then I have another marigold. I think it's a French marigold. I'll have to look at the name of it. It's doing really well too. So, but
So
the salvias, that's
Court
my favorite this week.
Yeah, Court Jester is a French marigold, but I think Queen Sophie is too. And she's been nice and neat and tidy, which is important to me. It's Queen, I think it's Queen Sophie. I'm looking it up real quick. Queen Sophia. So Queen Sophia is very beautiful, and let's see what type it is. You know what? It is a French marigold, but here's the difference. It's an AAS winner.
Yeah.
And it has a nice tidy growth habit with really beautiful blooms. So I can't say I'm not as in love with it as I am the African marigolds. I saw yours and they were beautiful too. So, to each his own in marigold land. But my attitude is if the foliage doesn't have some scent and you're trying to grow it with your tomatoes because of whatever reason, you want to grow the ones with scented foliage. The end.
The end. Okay. So now it's time for the question of the week, which you got this question, so you may read
Yeah.
it.
What is wrong with my tomatoes? The flowers don't bear fruit. They end up falling off in spite of our best efforts. We baby them. We do the Florida weave. We water and fertilize a bit. And you know what I said back? Tomatoes are not easy. Tomatoes are hard in our climate. They are disease prone. And I said, they're probably having a really hard time with that heat wave we had because when daytime temperatures go up above 100 and nighttime temperatures are in the upper 70s or low 80s, the blossoms fall right off. And also be careful with too much nitrogen fertilizer because it can spur leaf growth and disease and bug pressure, and along with less fruit. So I think she had a combination of things going on there, many of which I touched on. I asked her what kind of fertilizer they were using, and it was a fish emulsion. And I said, so that's giving you a whole lot of leaf growth and not much fruit. So, here's the thing: you want to get your tomatoes in early enough here that they have time to set some fruit before we get those high temperatures. This year was a little more complicated because we had high temperatures in mid-June, which is not supposed to happen. So when I was trying to answer her question, she got a little confused and she said, "But you want me to put them out before mid-April?" No, I don't. I'm telling you, it's a crapshoot, honestly.
Yes. And this time of year, like I mentioned, I picked a tomato hornworm off one of my tomatoes because I was out there tying them up because they're for the most part doing really well. Then I saw there
Right?
were no leaves on that one branch and I thought, where are you? And within a second I found that thing. I got an eagle eye for it.
Yeah, you do.
So and the
All
other
you got to
thing
look
is
for is weird broken off foliage that is gone and large poop. And if you
right.
find the large poop, you know the tomato hornworm is right above it.
Should be. But they can move around fast on a tomato plant,
Eh,
surprisingly. Anyway, the
they're
other thing
big.
is don't be precious about that diseased foliage. And so I have yellow
Cut it off.
pear and I have two of them. One of them looks really bad and I cut off a whole bunch of foliage and I thought, well, you got about a week and then the whole plant's going to go. The one right next to it looks fine. So just don't be precious about it, as we say.
Yeah, just cut that foliage off. It ain't going to hurt anything anyway. People are really worried about that. And I'm like, no, people train their tomatoes up as, pillars all the time, and it produces a lot of foliage. So just don't worry about it. Just cut it
Yeah.
off. I had a lot of disease foliage, and you know what? I cut most of it off, and the tomatoes did just fine. I had a ton of tomatoes. So
Well, not to
there you
belabor
go.
this, but I did see on Instagram there was a gardener that he showed how he purposely, he's got the fruit setting and
Light or
everything,
fruit setting. Uh huh.
he purposely prunes up almost all the lower foliage. So he's got like this great big long stem and then all the foliage above that. So there's more than one way to grow a tomato. And with that, I'm going to do a quote and we're going to go to something completely different.
Okay.
We're so used to doing that we've forgotten about being. Jennifer Healy. True that.
Truth. So, for our flower this time, we decided to talk about night blooming flowers for those who love to be out in their gardens at night or those who want to attract moths to their garden. There are a lot
Exactly.
more species of moths in the United States than there are butterflies, and most of these are night flyers. I'd say, yeah, most of them. Some fly during the day, like the white line sphinx moth. But if you want to see moths in your garden, even if you don't go out at night, but say you want to see them in the early morning when they're resting, you want to plant night blooming flowers. And the queen of night blooming flowers is Nicotiana.
Yes. And we've talked about Nicotiana ad nauseum, I think, but there are different varieties. You don't have to just like Carol get some and let them sow in your garden and come up every year and just go with that. You've grown some really nice varieties.
I have. This year I grew only the lonely, and I totally, totally forgot to do. I'm sorry, I was looking up another night blooming flower I forgot about. I totally forgot that this particular one is a biennial. So basically, I have leaves this year. Next year, I'll have flowers, which is
Right.
fine. It's kind of taken up a lot of space to not be doing anything. But, that's okay.
So the next one is 4 o'clocks. and we did not put the botanical name down. We are slipping, Dee. So I don't grow this.
You want to know what it is?
I think I
I can
remember.
remember. It's Mirabilis jalapa, isn't it? Mirabilis jalapa.
Yeah, something like that. We'll put it in the show notes, but I don't grow them. I do know that they sell so readily around here, and in warmer climates, they act almost like a perennial, but here they're definitely an annual here.
Yeah, I would say the pink ones here are definitely an annual, but the ones that are no the pink, I'm sorry, I did that completely backwards because that's how it goes sometimes. The pink ones are definitely a perennial in our climate and cannot overwhelm everything else. I personally like salmon sunset, which is orange with a beautiful pink center, has the most beautiful fragrance, opens about 5 o'clock, stays open all night. I usually see it in the morning. It is more of an annual, but it reseeds, and so I get it every year. So,
Yeah, interestingly enough, I don't know if it's interesting, but when I was a kid, my dad let 4 o'clocks grow and self seed in the window wells for the basement windows. You know how there's a window well that you have for a basement window?
yes. Yeah.
So we always had 4 o'clocks growing in the window wells. And that's, I think, well, I've got a little well that takes you down to the crawl space. I thought, I should put some good soil in there and I'll just plant me some 4 o'clocks. But as soon as I do that, somebody will have to go down that crawl space for something. So anyway, next up,
Next up is evening primrose. So there's several different kinds. I'm thinking of the pink one. The pink one, it also has shades of white in it. It is very pretty, but it is aggressive. And why do we use the term aggressive instead of invasive?
because it is a native plant and natives can't invade, they can only aggress.
And some of them aggress in spades, but you know, people send me stuff all the time. They're like, "Oh my gosh, this is invasive," and I said, "Well, technically, it's not, but it does feel that way."
And I have some of that growing in that back flower bed along the back of my vegetable garden, and I am determined to get rid of it. I don't know how I let it grow back there, but I did. And I once rescued a woman from buying 2 gallon containers of that plant. And I said, A, it's not going to bloom all year. And I says, trust me, you don't need 2 gallon containers of that plant. One will be a plenty and you'll be thanking me later or cursing me that I didn't just grab it out of your hands and tell you, don't buy that.
No, no, stop, stop. Yeah, and you point out that there's one called Onothera tetragona, sunspot, which you wrote about in 2008, a million years ago.
Yep.
And it is a variegated one, and it is not super aggressive. And that's because it's a variegated plant. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't think of very many. I can think of one. I can't think of very many. Talking to you, Artemisia, variegated Artemisia. It is very aggressive and very invasive, but most most variegated plants are not very aggressive.
Right. And I still have it out there. I mean, it kind of comes up. It has a bright yellow flower. And so I don't tend to, it's been crowded out because that's in the flower bed. That's a big mess. And then just this, there's another evening primrose with yellow flowers, Onotheria biennis, which is also quite aggressive.
Right,
So,
and it's called commonly the Missouri. I should say Missouri primrose. And so I had it for a long time. Has a little bit bigger flowers. I liked it. I thought it was pretty, but eventually it died out here.
yeah,
And that, let's just talk about that for a minute. Sometimes things die out.
they do. They do. And
They
sometimes
come, they go.
they come, they go. And sometimes you think, didn't I used to have and name a flower?
X.
And then you're thinking, I haven't seen that in a while. Where'd it go?
Right. So that doesn't mean you're a failure as a gardener. I get a lot of that question too. And I'm like, stuff moves around, stuff comes, stuff goes. Sometimes it shows back up, and then you go, oh, hello there, you're back.
And I'll tell you what, here's my thing on failure in the garden. You can't fail if you're out there trying. You just can't fail. You
Nope.
just can't.
And my attitude is gardening's all about failure. It's all about picking yourself up and trying again. And
You betcha.
it's a great lesson in tenacity.
It is.
Okay, so next is the moon vine, which is one of my personal favorites.
And I have never grown this plant. Never, ever have I grown a moon vine.
So easy to grow. Soak the seeds first. It's in the Ipomoea family, and so it is a morning glory type plant. It has great big blooms. Certain moths love it dearly. It looks like something magical in your garden if you go out in the evening at all. And I can't remember
So
if I said or not.
I got the question for that. So one thing that surprises people around here is morning glories are not the first thing to bloom in summer. And oftentimes it's much later in the summer before morning glories really start blooming. Is that true of moon vine? It would take a little while before it started actually blooming.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't bloom early. It wants hot, hot weather, as does morning glory. My morning glories still haven't bloomed yet this year. I mean, they will.
Yes.
It's just when they're ready. That's another good. I mean, people ask me all the time, why isn't my X blooming yet? And I'm like, because it's in its own place in the garden, in its own microclimate, and it doesn't want to yet,
Yeah.
usually.
Yeah.
And that's true. I have a friend, she lives in west of Oklahoma City, and she posted about her morning glories today. And I thought, mine aren't blooming yet. Huh. But I see them and they're starting to climb. So I know they're fine. They're just not ready yet. All right. So moonvine is very pretty. It takes a little while to bloom. It wants warm, warm weather. And it looks really good planted with morning glory because then you get something in the morning and you get something at night.
So the night blooming jasmine is not on Carol's list. This is a southern plant to her, sometimes sold as a blooming house plant.
It
But
doesn't overwinter here either. I mean, night blooming jasmine, I own it, and I want to point out that it doesn't bloom all summer. It blooms in about mid spring, and mine didn't even bloom this year. For whatever reason, it didn't feel the need. And I have it in a pot and I bring it into my greenhouse. Actually, I think what happened was it got really warm in the greenhouse and it set it off, and I think it bloomed then, which is unusual. It does smell delicious, and our weather was so crazy in spring, I hadn't moved it out yet. So I guess it did bloom. It just bloomed really early. It smells great. You know, if you want to grow it, you're going to have to grow it in a pot and bring it in.
the next plant, night phlox, I'm looking it up now. I had never heard of this thing.
I don't grow it, but I know some people who do.
So it's a South
You,
African native,
mhm.
botanically mispronounceable Zaluzianskia
Zal-
capensis. I don't know.
Zalucian, that's a hard one. Ovada. You know what? I've never grown it, but it's out there if you want to. But I have like three kinds of phlox or four. I have enough.
Well, it
Let's
says
move
here.
on.
Well, it
Oh,
says
there's
here.
more.
Now, wait a minute. Now I'm kind of
Okay.
interested. It's easily started from seeds. So that might be one to put on our seed list for next year.
Well, we could try it, I guess. You could. I'm not in the mood. But I could
Okay.
change
Well,
my mind by next year, you know?
yeah. Next year when I'm growing night phlox and you're like, oh, I wish I'd grown night phlox, you'll be in the mood.
Okay, can we move on to night blooming cereus, which is one of your favorite things?
Yes, it's not. This is a house plant for me, and I've written about it a zillion times. Dee's shaking her head, like I don't want one because it's a big floppy old house plant. Epiphyllum, oxypetalum, but the flower is like unlike anything you've ever seen. And if you are blessed enough to have a night blooming cereus, you literally can watch that flower open up at night. And that one of the things, all the neighbors would come over and sit and watch the night bloomer bloom. So onward.
Because it doesn't always bloom. I mean, it takes a
No.
long time sometimes.
Yes.
So that was a big plot. That was a big plot point in Crazy Rich Asians. Did you ever see that movie?
I did not.
Okay, well, Grandma, the matriarch of his family, she invited all of the family over. Like they flew in to see her night blooming cereus. And it did bloom and it was a big deal. But anyway, it was a big plot point. Which how often is a night blooming cereus a big plot point? Isn't it an Agatha Christie too?
I don't know if it's an Agatha Christie, but I know the Dennis the Menace movie, it was a flower like that Dennis ended up knocking it over when he opened up one of those garage doors that flips out. and he knocked it all down. And anyway,
which was the old fashioned garage doors. They all did that at one time. And then one I just added a little bit ago was Datura. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I was like, oh, yeah, we didn't put in Datura. We need to put that one in there. Datura is an amazing plant, and it has the most beautiful flowers, which are trumpet shaped and similar to that other plant that we were talking about earlier, moonvine, but they have little curly cues on them, and they really are beautiful. Datura gets a bad rap because if you eat the seeds, it can cause you to have hallucinations, and it can kill you if you eat too many of them. So
yeah,
don't eat the seeds. I mean, I can't tell you how many questions I get about plants that'll poison just pick your creature. And I'm like, well, don't plant that where your dog can eat it. Don't plant that where your cat can eat it. Don't eat the seeds
exactly. So,
or
so
don't
like
grow it.
to wrap this, one of the things that we notice is that many night blooming flowers are white, other than the evening primroses, which can be pink or yellow, depending on which
Yellow.
type.
Mm-hmm.
So this makes them stand out in the dark, and they're often heavily scented because that's how they attract their pollinators.
Mm-hmm.
And then because they're mostly white, we must, of course, mention the most famous white garden of all that you have been to.
I have. Yep. Sissinghurst, Vida Sackville West.
Very nice.
And she created it. She created it because she liked to go out at nighttime. That's all I'm going to say.
All righty then, do that quote and let's talk about a vegetable topic.
We all have our time machines, don't we? Those that take us back are memories, and those that carry us forward are dreams. And that's by H.G. Wells. And I assume that was in his book, The Time Machine. So, vegetables. I guess we use this here because this is a very old fashioned fruit.
It is. It's gooseberries.
Ribes or ribes, hirtellum,
I would say
hirtellum,
Ribes hirtellum,
hirtellum.
Hirtellum, is the
Yeah.
American species. There's also a European species. But as we both said, both of our grandmothers grew them. Now, I know my grandmother in Indianapolis grew them. I don't know about my farmer grandmother. And I did actually, Dee, I once tried to grow some gooseberries. I got this big idea, and they were in the flower bed next to the garage, which is now the pink garden, which means they didn't last. It's actually kind
Yeah.
of a big shrubby thing,
Yeah.
and
It's
it's
not a
not,
pretty plant.
no,
It's not
it's
something you
not.
want to put in the center of your flower border because it's a
No.
big, old, rangy plant. And at one time, it was outlawed.
Yeah, there was a big ban on it. And I looked up some stuff. There's still a ban in some states because you were reading in that Mary Jane's Farm magazine. What is it's a disease carrier.
Yeah,
And
it carries a fungal disease that infects pine trees. And according to this article, the federal ban was lifted in the 1960s and regulation was shifted to the states. Some northeastern states still restrict the cultivation of certain varieties. And so now that I know its botanical name, that it's a ribes, that makes sense because Ribes odoratum is another one that gets, even though it's a native plant, it is restricted in certain states. And so I have Ribes odoratum. I do not grow Ribes hirtellum because I don't grow gooseberries. Have you ever tasted gooseberries?
so I am going to assume that because my grandmother grew them, she probably made a gooseberry pie and maybe as a child, but I do not recollect that I've ever actually eaten gooseberries.
So I have. I've had a gooseberry pie. My grandmother made one, my granny. And this is my Missouri granny, who is not as much of a gardener as Grandma Nita. Okay. But she was a gardener, don't get me wrong. She just didn't have a huge vegetable garden and stuff. She liked houseplants and she liked flowers just around her house. But she got gooseberries somehow and she made a gooseberry pie. And it was the weirdest color because it's a weird shade of gray green because they're green. And it's sour, 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 so sour.
Which brings me to the point of saying, so somewhat like rhubarb, gooseberry is just an excuse to put a lot of sugar in a pie.
Heck yeah. And it was very good. It tasted like vitamins, sugary, sour vitamin C. That's what it reminds. You know what I mean? Like when you get one of those vitamin C tablets and it's
Uh-huh.
just so sour. That's what I remember about it. But I ate it because she served it with ice cream, vanilla
Yeah.
ice cream. Heck yeah. So you're going to talk a little bit about how we would grow gooseberries if we so wanted.
So if we so wanted, and this is something like if you have a big vegetable garden and maybe, you want to put, I don't want to say a privacy hedge, but just the edge of a vegetable garden where you don't really care, that would be the place to plant it, I think.
Yeah, deer
Stark,
hedge. It'd
yeah,
make a good deer hedge.
Stark Brothers only offers one variety. It's called Pixwell, Pixwell. And here's what they wrote about it. What a berry treat. When these big oval berries change from their spring green to a blush pink, they are ready to pick and eat. Greatest pie ever made and irresistible in jelly, too. Almost no care, cold hardy, ripens in July, self pollinating. So you really only need the one variety. But here's the big surprise that if you go to pick gooseberries, and I haven't gone to pick gooseberries, mine mine were such a mess. I pulled them out before they got really going good. They have thorns.
No kidding. Like so many of these plants, they have big thorns.
So people would be kind of surprised by that. Now, if you left your gooseberries on, I don't know what critters would eat them. I'm assuming birds would eventually find them and maybe
So
raccoons.
in this Mary Jane's Farm article that says Gooseberries Tart and Juicy is the title, it does not have the author, although the author says two things. She said, since my green and white striped variety is quite tart, I use them to make a delicious jam with a fresh, light taste. I'll show you how. And it's literally 4.5 cups of gooseberries, topped and tailed. I haven't heard those terms in a long time.
No.
That means cut on both ends. 3/4 of a cup of sugar and 1 cup of water. It takes 18 minutes. You cook it for 50 minutes and it makes about 3 cups, which would not be very many jars.
So
So
you don't have to add any pectin or anything to make a jam out of?
apparently not. So they must have a lot of pectin in them, which some fruits do. So that's what brought this up is that article because I hadn't thought about gooseberries in years. It's one of the things I like about that magazine.
Well, and at least I can say that I attempted to grow gooseberries, but I thought that was when I was going through I want everything to be edible. If I'm going to have a shrub, why not have one that has berries on it that I could eat, blah, blah, blah. Anyway,
It's a
onward.
stage. It's a stage many of us go through, and some of us
Yeah.
stay there, and some of us go, well, that didn't work, so let's try something else. How about the next quote?
Books, like landscapes, leave their marks in us. Certain books, though, like certain landscapes, stay with us even when we've left them, changing not just our weathers, but our climates. And that is by the author Robert McFarlane in his book Landmarks, which I have checked out on Libby, but I have not had a chance to read it yet.
Cool. So I picked the book this week. I don't know how I found it. I must have been reading another book that referenced it, and it's an old one, and it's called From Seed to Skillet, A Guide to Growing, Tending, Harvesting, and Cooking Up Fresh, Healthy Food to Share with People You Love by Jimmy Williams, author, Susan Heger, author, and Eric Stoudemire, photographer. I am really glad that we now label everybody. Like the photographer gets credit too and gets it pretty big. The photography in this book, well, first I'll just say a little bit about it. It was by the publisher, okay? So Jimmy Williams learned all about gardening at the knee of his grandmother, who was a South Carolina native from a Gullah community, whose members are descendants of Caribbean slaves. He pays homage to his family history in this inspiring step-by-step guide to designing and planting a backyard vegetable garden and growing one's own food. Okay, so it's all about, in my opinion, it's about someone who decided I want to grow the things that I put in my recipes. And he didn't, oh, there's a hummingbird right outside my window.
Cool.
And it's a she is drinking off the vitex trees. Go, little hummingbird.
Hey, there's a
Okay,
dragonfly outside my window.
This is why we garden right here.
Exactly. All right, keep going.
So anyway, he decided he wanted to grow things. I think this book is not brand new at all, but I like
2010. I
the
looked it up.
yeah, I
2010.
like the message in it. There are beautiful photographs, and I like his quote. And I think this quote is pretty wonderful. A 1942 pamphlet on victory gardens issued by the U.S. Department of Agriculture urged all Americans to consider it, quote, a public duty as well as a private necessity, end quote, to raise at least some of their household's food, hence the victory garden. And he was saying, you know what, we need to get back to doing that. And with the high prices at the grocery store for food, right now, this is a really good reason to have a vegetable garden. No matter, you aren't going to ever, unless you have a pretty big vegetable garden, be able to grow enough to, put everything up, as my grandmother would say. But you can sure grow a lot of things that you enjoy. And this is just a really enjoyable book. I read the whole thing. It talks a lot about raised beds, how to construct them. And then at the very end, there's some information about his recipes. Okay. And I'm trying to get to that. Hold on. I didn't mark it. I should have. There's a whole section on herbs too, by the way. Okay. So from my kitchen to yours, Williams family recipes. What I found interesting is he comes from the Gullah lineage in South Carolina. So
Uh-huh.
much of these recipes were passed down in my family too. My family came out of Texas. They came through the Houston port and worked their way up to Oklahoma, Missouri, and Illinois. So I have people all in this area. My daddy's family came from Tennessee this way. I don't know how they entered the United States because all my family are immigrants, but the Arterburns come out of Tennessee. And if you're an Arterburn, you're related to every other Arterburn in the United States because there weren't very many of them. And they've traced it back to two guys. But here are some recipes. These are things I grew up with too. Indian summer succotash, absolutely. I mean, it was something my grandmother made. Now, I've never made burnt onion collard greens, but basically it's collard greens and then they add on top caramelized onions. Sounds
Yum.
good to me, right? Caramelized onions or pickled onions are good on everything. Sweet and sour cucumbers, we make cucumber salad. Same thing. Nana's creamed corn, yes, my grandmother made creamed corn. Fried okra, but he adds chives to his. I thought that was interesting.
That
The
is
chives is
interesting.
in the cornmeal. Okra and tomatoes, very popular in my family. Also, in almost all of these, he either has butter or he has pork. Very important animals to my family's background, along with his family's background. Here's one I had never thought of: green bean and asparagus casserole. Here, green beans and asparagus don't grow at the same time, but maybe they
No,
do in South Carolina because
that
their
could be. One
timing
thing
is different.
here's something interesting. When I looked on our Amazon link, you can buy, it's out of print. You can buy used copies. But
Yeah.
when I went to my library link to see, oh, I'll just check this out from the library, they only offer it as an ebook. But it's not an ebook over there on Amazon. So it must be going to show up in that Libby app instead of a Kindle. But
I'm
anyway,
going to guess so. So quickly, I don't think I would do I don't think I would do it online like that because the pictures are important to the story.
uh-huh.
I think it's worth buying a good used copy.
Very
And his recipes are nice. I will say the two differences between his family's background and mine is sweet potatoes. My family didn't do a lot of sweet potatoes, but think about
right.
that. South Carolina, big sweet potato state. What other agriculture item would you think that would be one that you wouldn't find so much in our family backgrounds, but in South Carolina?
Tobacco, sugar cane,
Indeed, tobacco and sugarcane, indeed. But no, I'm thinking more of a grain, and it's a grain that you flood the fields.
sorghum,
Rice.
rice. I didn't come up with
Rice.
rice. I came up with sorghum and tobacco and
Sorghum grows really well here. Don't eat tobacco. It's poisonous.
it's poisonous. I would not. I wouldn't eat. Yeah, don't eat
I know
tobacco.
you weren't thinking about eating tobacco. Anyway, rice was not a big part of my family's diet at all, but of course my diet, it's a huge part. because it's one of the least allergic foods you can eat. So just say cool, although it does have arsenic in it because it naturally takes up arsenic from the soil. But that's just an interesting little aside. So there you go. I
All
thought it
right.
was a good book. I enjoyed it. Did I learn anything new? Yeah, I learned that I could do sweet potato cornmeal biscuits. I want to eat
There.
those.
Okay, that's From Seed to Skillet, a guide to growing, tending, harvesting, and cooking up fresh, healthy food to share with people you love by Jimmy Williams, Susan Heger, Eric Stoudemire is the photographer. I will do the quote. No, you will do the quote.
Gardening is not about instant gratification. It is a process from seedling to flower, a matter of a few weeks, and from small rooted cutting to useful shrub, often a few years. This whole process, rather than the ultimate product, seems to me half the joy of gardening. Penelope Hobhouse. It's what we've been talking about.
Yes, it's in the process, not so much, you know.
So you're going to talk about something we don't really want to talk about.
I
Is
want to talk
maybe?
about it.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing.
Oh, good. I thought we were talking about another invasive plant.
No, no,
Oh,
no, not
good, good,
invasive at
good.
all. In fact, what happened was this little weed, and it's called the, sorry, my screen is frozen up. What is it called?
False mermaid weed.
False mermaid weed. So the last time anybody saw it was 1916.
And what is it?
It's a little tiny weed with little dainty
Oh, it is
flowers.
tiny.
If you had never seen it before, you probably wouldn't even think anything of it. But a botanist discovered it, and this has got too many pop-ups for me to know the date. Within the last, like earlier this spring or
Yeah.
sometime,
He
a
found it in
botanist.
Vermont.
It's native to Vermont. It's not native to Oklahoma or Indiana. But I just thought it was a sweet story about how, they think something is extinct, gone from this planet,
Yeah.
and then
She's been
somebody,
looking for years. Her name's Grace Glenn. She's a
yeah.
Vermont state botanist. Go Grace.
So anyway, I just thought it was neat that they saw that absolutely tiny, they said. So you have to know what you were looking for to find a false mermaid weed. And I'm so happy for her that she found it. It's just a feel good
Yes,
story.
a colleague, it's a kind of an interesting story because a colleague sent her a photo of something else because he was I say he, a state biologist studying turtle habitat. And then she saw the flower up in the corner of the photograph and she said, "Oh my, oh my."
Forget your turtles. Look up there.
Yeah, she said she actually rubbed her eyes and said, "No way." And then she found it. And so it was botanical breaking news in a Facebook post announcing the find from the Vermont Fish and Wildlife.
Anyway, that is
That is
the story.
exciting.
I knew you'd like it once you actually read it.
Well, I was just scared it was another invasive plant. And I was like, no, or an invasive insect. And I was like,
No,
no.
no, it's a native weed. The false mermaid weed has been spotted. We may all rest at night now. I'll do a quote.
Okay, cool.
Magic is seeing wonder in nature's every little thing, seeing how wonderful the fireflies and how magical are the dragonflies. Amma H. Vania, Vanniarachy. And I'm sorry to Amma Vaniarchi. I cannot pronounce that in.
It's
He's
like
laughing at
it's
me.
got to be Ukraine. No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the fact that that name is impossible for just a plain old English speaker to pronounce. It's got to be Ukrainian or Russian or
I
something
think it's
like that.
Indian. I think it's Indian.
Oh, it could be Indian. Yes, because it's got two CHs together. And we're like, huh? We don't know how to pronounce it. We are so sorry. Okay, rabbit holes. I'll go first. So my rabbit hole can be related to botany. All right, I decorated my office this week and I did a story on it.
Yeah, it's
And people
beautiful.
really and people really responded to my little story. And I for some reason then was thinking about how I wanted to put some bee plates on my wall since I can't be a beekeeper anymore. And
Right?
then I found these I was thinking just something simple. and I was going to do three of them. It was going to
Yeah.
be pretty cool. No, 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 no. I end up in a rabbit hole of George Jones HOJ familiar flowers plates, which is a plate that was, it took me a little while to figure this out. The plates are designed by George Jones and Sons Ltd of England, and he was in business from 1864 to about 1950. HOJ stands for the artist Horace Overton Jones, and he was George Jones's youngest son and a painter, and he designed the familiar flowers pattern and a bunch of other patterns that were used on his father's ceramics. The ones I like have scalloped edges, of course they do, and they have a gold rim. And I found one for a very decent price, and I did buy it on eBay. But then I realized, oh, these plates are quite expensive.
Oh, you
And
sent me a
so
link. Yeah. I'm like, whoo, that's pricey.
hundreds of dollars, which I will not be buying for that. I may only have the one plate and I may put it above my Oklahoma scissor tail and go on. I will say this, they are beautifully done. He was a wonderful artist. The one I bought is hellebores, but
Uh-huh.
I really want the ones that are pelargoniums, of course. It's a red pelargonium. It's beautiful. The detail is gorgeous. And each one of them have a bumblebee flying in or flying out.
So
So they're pretty cool.
do me a favor, Dee.
What's that?
Write on a note and say, this plate has a lot of value. Don't ditch it and when I die, and put that on the back so that your kids will know that, well, that's worth a good dinner out if they could sell that for, they're only going to go up in price.
Yeah, they are. And so I'll just keep an eye out for them. I put some saved searches on there. But if you buy, as a group, it's in the hundreds, and I'm not spending that. So they're just pretty. I'm going to hang them on the wall because I love plates hung on the wall.
Well, and
Which,
here's the
by the
thing,
way, did you know that's back in style? It's
hanging plates
called,
on the wall, because that was
yes,
something our grandmothers did. And,
it was
but
back
Dee,
popular in the 80s too. And then now it's back and it's called grandmother style and granny style. And it's
Granny
popular
style's
again.
big with the youngins.
It is.
So,
And me.
so here's a plate story. So Thanksgiving, we always do a craft. And so several years ago, my sister bought just plain white dinner or did dessert size plates from one of those places where you can just buy like a big stack for not very much. And then you can just use markers and you can draw on them, and
Yeah.
then you can heat them in the oven on a low temperature and that'll make the bake in. And so we all made plates, and my plate is hanging granny style in my breakfast nook that I
Oh,
made.
cool. I like
So
it.
that's a fun, keep that in the back of your hat because you've got the markers. It's just Sharpies. You get a plain white plate, you know, you could make
Hmm.
that.
I
Or
hate
you and your,
crafting.
I love me some crafting. Dee,
I
I'm
know
not
you
good at
do.
it.
I hate it. I hate it with a
Oh
passion,
my goodness.
except puzzles, but that doesn't even count as crafting, which I finished
Oh
another
no.
puzzle.
I'm sitting here
So
thinking I'm going to go get me a big stack of plates and cups, and I'm going to mark on them with Sharpies and put them in the oven.
so I want to know what happened to all of your scrapbooking that you were going to do.
Well, sometimes my hobby is buying the supplies, not actually doing it.
I'm
But
all
I
about buying the supplies. I just don't want to do the craft.
I do some. I mean, it's the gardening season. I've cracked you up. Okay, so we were a bit on a similar path this past week.
Apparently, we were.
So I mentioned that I was researching another lost lady of garden writing. It is Anne Ophelia Dowden, who turns out to be a very, very famous botanical illustrator. If you are into that, she lived for almost 100 years. She died, she
Hmm.
was, I think, just a few months shy of her 100th birthday.
Go
So
her.
I'm going to write about her this coming week for the Lost Ladies of Garden Writing. But in the meantime, I went from owning one of her books, a book on state flowers where she illustrated all the state flowers.
Hmm.
And it is old enough that, by the way, it lists the state flower of Oklahoma as mistletoe, which we know it's not mistletoe anymore. It's a
Nope.
rose. But
But
anyway,
mistletoe is still, oh, I've forgotten what it's called. Oklahoma's botanical. Oklahoma's botanical plant or something.
Well, she lists the peony for Indiana. And in that book, if there's a story, she tells it. If there isn't, she just says when the legislature put it into place. But I did find out from that Indiana has had 4 state flowers before, and the peony is the 4th.
Huh.
And so that's a trivia question for people who think they know Indiana. What are the other 3? So the chrysanthemum was first.
Mm-hmm.
And then for a while, it was the tulip tree flower. But
I
then they
knew it was
made,
the tulip tree flower. You know why? Because it's
because
on my quilt. I have a quilt of state flowers and it's on there.
so they made that the state tree. So
The
then they came
tree.
up with a new
Mm-hmm.
flower. The 3rd flower was zinnias.
I love me some zinnias.
And because remember that book of the history of zinnias that we got? It
Mm-hmm.
starts out by talking about some farmers down in Bargersville, Indiana, that grew zinnias as cut flowers back before that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they arrived at peonies. Anyway, I digress. So now I own 6 books illustrated by Anne Ophelia Dowden. Some of them she wrote, some of them are written by like Hal Borland. And so the Golden Circle, a book a month that I got, is a Hal Borland book. And it's beautiful, Dee. I'm showing it to you.
Oh, I
And
really want that.
so I wrote a blog post that went out today, and I'll link to it, where I show a couple of the pictures from
It's
the book.
beautiful.
It's
How much did
it
that cost you?
one. So look at that picture with the violets, and
Notice,
that has
notice,
a.
listeners, how she just skipped right over that. Yeah,
Well, here's the thing: when one goes down in the rabbit hole and is beginning to buy good use copies,
it's expensive.
well, I don't think I paid more than about 10 or $15 per book.
Oh,
I
that's
don't.
good.
I don't
That's
think I
good.
spent more than that. And
That's not
this
bad
one,
at all.
this one, oh my gosh, this was somebody's personal copy, and the book is from '77.
Mm-hmm.
But they gave it as a gift in 1990. It says, "To my sweetheart Pam on Mother's Day, 1990. May all the
Uh-oh.
values implicit in the countryside, month in and month out, become real for your senses to behold this coming year. Love, Mark."
Wow. Wow, Mark. Mark.
Wow.
Woohoo.
So
I'm all a
anyway,
Twitter, Mark.
so then, so the picture of the violets, I took a picture of it with my phone, and it's now, I kind of blew it up a little bit, and it's now the background. It's the wallpaper
Your
on my phone.
screensaver. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, the detail that this woman has in her artwork is unbelievable.
Yeah, she's
Unbelievable.
good.
So
She is.
anyway, and then I thought, Dee's buying all these plates. I wonder if anybody thought to put any of her illustrations on plates,
Oh, I bet they
and
did.
they did not. No.
Oh,
I mean,
well, that's
her stuff is in museums, Dee. But I thought that somebody missed the mark. She could have made millions of dollars with these illustrations on plates and all those things. And it's like, oh my gosh. Anyway, big rabbit hole. I've uncovered a lot of fun stuff. It's going to be in the Lost Ladies of Garden Writing later this week. People have to check it out. Garden commission time.
Phew, you're out of breath, so I'll go. I don't have any garden commissions. I'm just going to do whatever the heck I want. It's
Well,
time to enjoy. It's time to enjoy all the work we put into the garden. The truth is, I should be deadheading roses again and feeding them. That's what I should do. And I should fertilize a few other plants in pots. I should cut back. I never did cut back that one purple petunia, and here's why. It still looks great. I
then
don't know
don't cut
why
it
it looks
back.
great. It's all rangy and crazy, and then there's a big, huge salvia sticking up out of the middle. It's that cathedral salvia. And I go out there and I look at it and I think, I'm not cutting you back. You look happy, and I'm just leaving you. So that's my advice to anybody right now. Just do what you want. Good Lord, we have a lot of, do's, a lot of shoulds.
So it's summertime, and I am going to harvest vegetables as they come ripe. I'm going to do weeding, and I've actually kept up pretty good with weeding. I water if I need to. The containers need watering every day. I'm going to fertilize on Friday like I did today. I'm going to
Cool.
put it on repeat. I'm going to tend to my seedlings. I got to, if some of them are really growing nicely, I actually might pot them up into individual pots but probably not. Probably they'll just grow in there for now. And that is going to be it because you've set the tone for the week. Summertime and the living is easy.
I think that's what we should say as our title.
There you go. Summertime and the living is easy. But I'll get the word garden in there.
The garden life is easy. Garden living is easy. You'll figure it out. You're good at
Okay.
titles. I
And in the
know.
meantime, I will wrap this up. Thank you for listening to the Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you subscribe to our free Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist at substack.com, you'll get a link to listen to the podcast a day early.
And if you want to help support us, use our affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing.
Or you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or make a one-time donation through PayPal.
Thank you to everyone who has done so. It helps us pay for podcast hosting.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.